Good day, everyone. I am from Group 4, and we will be discussing about the modern Filipino architecture. And here are the five different periods during this era. And I am Alan Romil Emabad, and I'll be discussing about the American colonial period. This period started with when the Philippines gained independence from Spain, and after the Spanish-American War in 1898. A Filipino-American War broke out dahil hindi binigyan ng mga Americans ng independence ang Philippines at nag-take over lang sila after ng Spain. Nagkaroon din ng improvement sa health and sanitary during this time, pati na rin ng mga colonial houses. Architect Edgar K. Bond is one of the most influential architects during this early period of American occupation, and his works are impression of Spanish colonial buildings and proto-modernist design, and has unadorned facades and large windows. Some of his works are tents and dormitories in Teachers Camp, first building of the Manila City Hall, and Casa Vallejo in Baguio. And this is the master plans of Manila and Baguio. This was made to arrange the Manila's chaotic patchwork of communities and is led by architect Daniel H. Burnham along with architect William Parsons. Burnham is an American architect and an urban designer. He creates master plans of Chicago, Manila, and downtown Washington. Architect William Parsons was chosen by Burnham to implement his works. Parsons' designs are with the capice shells for window sash in place of glass. And this is the master plan of Manila. This is patterned over the Venice Paris, and this is a testimony of the American imperial presence and technological modernity. It is also where they established the zoning of building sites. This is the master plan of Baguio. This was originally made by the Americans as a health resort, as well as to have an existing railway system, but later failed. This is their contributions: the CAN system of concrete reinforcements, introduction of hollow blocks, anti-termite hardwood, and mass fabrication of building types, which has lessened the time of creating buildings and less complexities of the government buildings. The next is the first generation of Filipino architects, which are Filipinos sponsored by the US to study architecture in US and later settled in the Philippines. Thomas Mapua y Bautista created the Manila Central Post Office and the design of St. Lasal Hall. Thomas Argeles designed the Manila's leading jewelry store. Antonio Manialac Toledo designed the Manila City Hall and the National Museum building, which we can see here is a reflection of the American influence with the government buildings and has a touch of Greek and Roman architecture. Juan Marcos Arellano y de Guzman designed the Manila Metropolitan Theater, which is an Art Deco, and the Cebu Provincial Capital, which is a neoclassical. The second generation of Filipino architects are Filipinos that emerged during the 1920s and 1930s. Andres Luna de San Pedro designed the Perez Samiano building and Lizares Mansion. Pablo Severo Antonio designed the facade of the main building of the Far Eastern University and the Galaxy Theater. Juan Nakpil designed the administration building of UP Diliman and Magsaysay building. The next is Postbar to be discussed by Carl Joshua Alejo.
Good day, everyone. I'm Carl, and today I'm going to discuss to you the post-war era. So, after ng American period, nagkaroon ng World War II. And after the World War II comes this era. So, in this era, the Philippine architecture was still dominated by the American style. Bakit? Kasi most of the building designs that time are still influenced by the Art Deco style. And Art Deco style is very Americanized, di ba? So yung devastation na naidulot ng World War II actually gave us the opportunity to extend our emerging architectural concept kahit papaano to detach from the bondage of traditional forms. So it all started in 1946 kung saan natuto tayong i-utilize ang paggamit ng reinforced concrete steel, and glass sa mga buildings, and other design strategies such as absence of applied decoration. A perfect example of this is the San Manillo building. In 1950s naman, we have the opportunity to use elements such as brise soleil, glass walls, pierced screens, and thin concrete shells. A perfect example of this naman is the Quezon Memorial Monument designed by Federico Ilustre. So in this era, there was a principle called forms follow function. This was professed by the third generation architects. So these gentlemen have their own notable works that reflects this principle. So an example of this is Cesar Concho's UP Palma Hall, Angel Nakpil's National Press Club, Alfredo Luz Menzi Building Ayala, Otilio Arellano's The Philippine Pavilion, Felipe Mendoza's The Philippine Veterans Building, Gabriel Formoso's Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and Carlos Arguelles Philippine National Bank. So pag sinabi nating form follows function, ito yung prinsipyo na kung saan yung shape daw ng building natin should based upon its intended function or purpose. So, in this era din, we witness space age na kung saan in-experiment nila ang sculptural plasticity of poured concrete through the use of shell technology. And in this era, merong amendment na kung saan the height of a building is limited only to 30 meters. So, ang first skyscraper is also built in this era, which is the Picache building by Angel Nakpils. This is a 12-story building. And in this era din, may nag-restrict sa amendment na 30-meter height restriction. And that is Cesar Concho. And it was the Insular Life building. And in 1960s naman, the Filipino incorporated some modernist formal principles by employing local materials and referencing vernacular traditions. So this is an example of this, the Amon Trading Corporation. And in 1970s, si Imelda Marcos daw pursued a singular national architectural style para ma-concretize yung official maxim of isang bansa, isang diwa. Then after this comes the Marcos era.
Let us now go to the Marcos era at which is from 1972 to 1986. At ang mga structures po nung panahong ito ay mga highways, schools, health centers, and cultural centers. This was funded by foreign loans. And one of the example is the Cultural Center of the Philippines, or the CCP, which was established in 1966 under the Executive Order number 30, and the Manila National Film Center of the 1982. Nagkaroon po ng isang tragic accident na kung saan nabury po yung mga trabahador po sa panahong ito. And next is the Folk Arts Theater in 1974, or also known as Tanghalang Francisco Balagtas. Hinango po ito sa pangalan ng famous na writer na si Francisco Balagtas. And next is the Philippine International Convention Center, or the PICC, in 1976. This was the time na revival po ng brutalist architecture. And next is the San Juanico Bridge na nagko-connect po sa island ng Leyte and Samar from the city of Tacloban project, which was one of the biggest projects under the Marcos government, na nagkakahalaga po ng $1 billion. And the Tondo Urban Renewal Project para po sa mga mahihirap. And the Makiling Center for the Arts, or the National Arts Center, na-establish po noong 1976 by the First Lady Imelda Marcos, and this was for the young and aspiring artists na nakabase po sa lugar na iyon. And Nayong Pilipino at ang People's Park in the Sky, and also mga health centers po na ipinatayo sa administrasyong ito ay ang Philippine Heart Center and Lung Center of the Philippines, and the National Kidney and Transplant Institute. And now let us go to the post-Marcos era.
Good day, everyone. I'm Sajay Gyok. With an impressive colonnades, concrete facades, and dominating aura ng Marcos era, let's proceed to the post-Marcos era, 1980s to the present. So 20 years Pagkatapos ma-establish ni Marcos ang EO number 30, he was overthrown from power. And it was known as the People Power Revolution of 1986. So, isa sa mga notable na structures noon sa era is the shrine along the Epifanio de los Santos Avenue, o mas kilala natin bilang EDSA. It is functioning as a church. It was designed by architect Francisco Manyosa. Another is Flame of Freedom by Manny Casal na nagre-represent sa islands ng Philippines. And the most prominent would be enormous Virgin Mary statue by Virginia T. Navarre on the top of the church. Next is EDSA Shrine. EDSA Shrine showcase Filipino ideals. It embodies struggles, hopes, and history. And one of the unique icon of this architecture is it was created by Filipinos for Filipinos. Next is Greenbelt Chapel, or mas kilala natin bilang Santo Niño de Paz Chapel. Isa siyang Catholic church, a home of worship service and healing rituals. Ngayon, the open-air chapel remains untouched and look exactly the way it was designed noong 1980s. Next is the Mind Museum. Meron siyang 5 main galleries and own theme, including atom, life, earth, universe, and technology. Ito ay dinisenyo ni Ed Calma and was inspired by cellular structure and growth. Next is si Felino June Palafox. Isa siya sa mga notable architects nung post-Marcos era. Dahil na rin siya ay may 48 years of experience in architecture and 46 years in planning. One of the known structures ni Felino was Rizal Tower, Rockwell Center, Hidalgo Palace, Luna Gardens. Next and last, James Stewart Polshek. Si Polshek was devoted himself to public buildings ranging from the Rose Center for Earth and Space at the Museum of Natural History. Ayon sa kanya, a true importance of architecture lies in its ability to solve human problems, not stylistic one. Another for him, a building is too permanent and too influential on public life. Kaya, ang personal comfort to be created primarily as public art. And now let's proceed to contemporary architecture.
Good day, everyone. I am Esdra Joshua Ariola, and I will be discussing to you the contemporary architecture in the Philippines. Unlike classical Philippine architecture, contemporary Philippine architecture was not anymore a mainly product of foreign cultures. Instead, yung mga innovations ng design ay galing sa mga Filipinos at doon sila kumukuha ng inspiration based sa kanilang mga experiences and ideas na influence sa environment nila. Most notable architects in the modern era. First is Juan Arellano. Isa siyang Renaissance man, a Filipino architect and a painter, and kilala rin siyang architect ng Manila's Metropolitan Theater at Manila's Post Office Building. Next, si Carlos Arguelles. Si Carlos Arguelles ay isang Filipino architect who was known for being a leading proponent of the international style of architecture in the Philippines. Ang famous work ng Ateneo de Manila University at Philal Life Building in Manila. Next is si Juan Nakpil, isang architect, teacher, and civic leader, a pioneer and innovator in Philippine architecture. Ang mga gawa niya ay ang University of the Philippines Diliman at Jeronimo de los Reyes Building. Next is si Jose Maria Zaragoza. Siya naman ay isang pillar of modern architecture sa Pilipinas, but rest a half-century career that produced ecclesiastical edifices and structure of modernity in the service of God and humanity. Ang famous works niya ay ang Meralco Buildings, Santo Domingo Church, and others. Next is the Pablo Antonio. His basic design is grounded on simplicity with no clutter. Isa rin siyang pioneer of modern Philippine architecture at kilala in some quarters as the foremost Filipino modernist architect. Ang famous work niya ay ang Far Eastern University at Ideal Theater. Next is si Carlos Santos Viola. Isa siyang architect sa Pilipinas at kilala sa pagdisenyo ng mga building gaya ng churches ng Iglesia ni Cristo. Next is si Leandro Locsid. Reshape the urban landscape with a distinctive architecture reflective of Philippine art and culture. Ang ginawa niya ay ang Cultural Center of the Philippines and also Folk Arts Theater. Next is si Francisco Bobby Manyosa. He believed na ang Pilipinas daw ay climate calls for tropical architecture whose features include accommodations to do wet and dry season. So ang famous work niya ay ang Coconut Palace or also known as the Manyosa House. Next is si Ildefonso P. Santos Jr. Isa rin siyang architect and kilala bilang father of Philippine landscape architecture. He was recognized as a national artist of the Philippines in the field of architecture in 2006 at ang famous na gawa nito ay ang Paco Park.